In the Hearts and Minds, Book 0, Story 17, Ground Hollow, continued. When you make a child, she'd written, her handwriting more legible than usual. He didn't think it was because it was a slow war day. She had taken more time to write this out, which told him how long she'd thought the words over. He wished he could see her in person to tell her that he appreciated this gesture very much. You're not making a clone. He is partly you, partly me, and partly himself. You can't treat him as you treat yourself, or how you treat me. They decided Iago would have to move in with his mother in the capital. It was for the best, really. His son was scared of cows. How could a dairy farmer be scared of cows? The head wasn't as disappointed as he felt he should be. He'd never understood his parents' push for his marriage and the birth of his son. He did it, but that was because they wouldn't give him the ownership of the farm unless he did. But why would it matter? Anybody worthy could inherit the farm. When asked, the head's father had spat out his dentures. After 20 minutes of sticking them back into the right places, wetting the entire front of his plaid and the arms of his rocking chair, he'd finally narrowed cloudy eyes at the head and chastised him as if he were his son's age. This ain't no rotten throne, boy. Nobody would let that anywhere near the keys to the barns. What a calamity, what would befall us? Then why? The head didn't dislike his son, exactly. He just didn't know what to feel about him, other than a faint sympathy for being stuck in a dairy family with a dad like him. These cows. The head's father chinned the fields where white monsters roamed the bluegrass. They live and die, pushing right along. They birth, they eat, they give milk, then they birth another one. Eventually, they die. They don't care about family, except a mother and her young'un. That's what all them city folk think. They're wrong, the head jumped in. Cows form strong attachments with one another. They don't like to be separated, and a mother's devotion to their young is, they got family, the head's father said, sitting back in his chair and swiping a tongue across his dentures. Now, how can you protect a family when you got none of your own? Are we not family? Dad, I thought we... The head's father snapped, throwing out a clawed hand and scraping 3 layers of phlegm off of his throat with the force of his words. Not that! Why is your head such a pig? Stop and think. If you don't know how to protect nothing, how can these cows trust you with what they gotta protect? The head thought long and hard. Children coming and going through the grasses. It was never quiet in Ground Hollow. To understand the cows, you have to be the cows. Be the cows. His father nodded. Later, the head penned his wife, sending a second affirmative reply less than a day behind the first. He should live with you. I don't know how to be the cow. She'd written back, 4 days later, I didn't expect to hear that from you. And thus it was settled. Iago left as the shaky remnants of whatever the head in Ground Hollow had riddled upon him, and the head returned to writing his wife letters and attempting to write to his son. It worked, sometimes. Years passed, and the head buried his parents, then his wife's parents. At the funeral, he'd seen his son again, all grown up, standing at his wife's side. The two of them were clearly related, though the head liked to believe Iago's height had come from him. It felt almost natural to walk up to them and pretend he was one of them, but then his wife blushed when he accidentally touched her hand, and He stopped acting human. Lord, he'd become the cow in the end. It was much more comfortable at Ground Hollow, surrounded by his fields and wild relatives. Writing letters was far more comfortable, too, except that he had to constantly remind himself not to ask his wife what color her nails were now, and if she'd gotten a haircut, prompting a picture, prompting his instinctual need to tuck his tail and hem like a nervous Charlet about to be stuck with a thermometer for the first time. Comfortable was within reason. One couldn't expect happiness to last very long. Comfort was a much more achievable goal, and the head couldn't ask for anything else. Just as he'd settled into this coziness, a knock on the door to the main house destroyed every complacent block he'd built up over the past several years. Iago? His son was no longer a child. His eyes had this red gleam he'd only seen on aggressive cows. Against his back was a pretty doll. No, that was a person with an unreal face. Arrayed behind him like stars in a constellation, city folk, their eyes catching the gleams of metal in glasses and makeup. Can we have the hunting cabin? Iago asked, chest heaving in breath. It was only then that the head realized it was pouring rain, and that the girl on his back was swathed in a tent-like covering. What is it? The head's sister, the doctor, rounded the stairs. Several heads, many of them small, peeked around from the upper floors and up from the basement. The red in Iago's eyes didn't leave. Instead, the head watched his son assess each and every member of his family, but it wasn't in recognition, and it wasn't in greeting. But the head hadn't stopped being a father all these years, even though he was bad at it. And what did you do when faced with an aggressive cow? The head nodded, closing the door just enough that peering eyes could no longer see. Of course, son. This is your home.